What up, Fightful fam? Welcome to 1-2 Punch. Player 1, Shakiel Mahjouri. Player 2, it's Coach Kavanaugh's favorite media member, Zane Simon, editor over at Bloody Elbow. How's it going, sir?
Shout out to all my SBG fans. I couldn't be more honored to be one of the favorites for one of the great talents in the MMA industry. And yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yes, man, it's an honor. I was telling you off the air, it's funny. We work together. I mean, we still do an extent over with the Combat Culture YouTube channel, but we worked together for a year, 2 years. I can't even remember anymore, but this is the first time we've done anything on camera together, so I'm very excited. For those of you who are tuning in as per usual, thank you for joining us. Your support means the world. First time listeners, this is 1-2 Punch. It's news talk on a win-lose-draw system. What that means is we're going to assign the week's biggest winners and losers before drawing up a little preview for UFC Vegas 17. Winners, losers, just whose stock went up, whose stock went down. We mean no shade unless it's towards the Paul brothers. Now, without further ado, let me hit this animated intro. And there we go. As Luke Thomas would say, some housekeeping notes. Please hit subscribe, tap the notification bell. Those go so far to helping our channel grow. We're really close to our 3,000 subscriber goal for the end of the year. Help us get there. A thumbs up on this video also helps us get in front of more eyeballs. Hit us up in the chat, guys. Leave one super chat donation, any amount, $1, 1,000. I have my preference, but it's all good. That'll get all your questions and statements read from start to finish. That's enough of me shilling out. Zane, let's get to it, my man. First things first, I hate to start here, but we kind of have to. Has anyone in the combat sports world gotten more buzz this week than Jake Paul?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I joked when he was fighting on the Tyson Roy Jones Jr. undercard that Jake Paul versus Nate Robinson was the most notable fight between prime athletes that week. And he's still kind of making more waves than pretty much anybody else out there right now. And it sucks, but the man's a true celebrity. So
what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? That he is a modern day celebrity. I do have to we give him the plus here because it seems like, I don't know if those DMs from Conor were legit, but it seems like he's finally getting the Notorious One's attention. Now I've got this Dillon Danis feud brewing. Brendan Schaub and Below the Belt seem to have their fingers in the pot there too. Below the Belt put out this video, and it was, a 3-camera angle of Dillon Danis getting pelted with all sorts of garbage. That video, I kind of believed that this was authentic when I first saw it, but the way Below the Belt pieced that together, it kind of looks staged. Where are you right now in terms of the authenticity of that encounter?
I mean, I hope it's authentic, not because I think that the Paul brothers are going to do anything that has a scrap of authenticity to it, but you're talking about winners and losers here, and if it isn't authentic, then man, did Dillon Danis really make himself look like a huge loser for zero payoff.
Elaborate on that. Is it based on his reactions, the fact that he got covered in crap and didn't get his one-uppance? Like, why is Dillon Danis a loser?
It's just, Dillon Danis is so, people have noted this. Dillon Danis has tried so hard to insert himself into that kind of cult of personality media sphere where he gets recognized just for being loud and annoying. And so to have somebody just kind of like pull up on him, prank him, and run off and share it all over, like it really is just, it's like having a bully get his pants pulled down in the middle of the auditorium. He might be getting some more notoriety for it, but it really is only humiliating. And it's more humiliating too because the man hasn't fought in like 2 years. So like Jake Paul, people are at least like, oh yeah, he did some stupid shit and he might go fight somebody in the next 2 months. Dillon Danis, does he even fight anymore? I don't know what Dillon Danis does.
What is Dillon Danis's pro MMA record at this point? It's 2-0. Okay, let me say this. I got some flack for bringing this up on a Fightful Fix recap that I did, but I was sort of gauging Jake Paul's possible opponents post Nate Robinson, and 4 names he mentioned were Conor McGregor, Jorge Masvidal, Ben Askren, and Dillon Danis. I got some flack for this, but am I crazy for believing that Jake Paul versus Dillon Danis could be competitive? Because one's got a 2-0 record in MMA, one's got a 2-0 record in boxing at this point. Obviously not against any meaningful competition, but I saw that footage of Jake Paul put in work on AJ Agazarm, and I just don't know if Dillon Danis's pure boxing is actually any good.
No, I thought when you said that you would be out of line for thinking he was competitive, I thought you meant for Dillon Danis. Honestly, like, if they're gonna box, I'm not gonna pick Dillon Danis to win a boxing match. But it would be like picking Ben Askren to outbox Jake Paul.
That's what I got shit for, is for saying that Jake Paul would outbox Ben Askren.
What? Oh my God! Do we have to go through this whole Damian Maia thing again, where some jackass was like, "There's no evidence that Ben Askren's a worse boxer than Damian Maia." Yeah, except in all of the footage of Ben Askren ever throwing a punch. Man boxes like Ronda Rousey. Come on.
Okay, so let's wrap up this Jake Paul talk, because people will kill us. I do have to say, having analyzed now Jake versus Ben, Jake versus Dillon, if anything, Jake is a bigger winner now more than ever. I don't think he's going to get a Conor McGregor fight. And just like with Floyd Logan, it's not going to go well for them. But if we get Jake Paul out of Dillon versus Dillon Danis on this, and Jake Paul, you and I are saying, could very possibly win that fight.
I wouldn't pick Dillon Danis to win it. I would have to see Dillon Danis do anything even close to winning that kind of
Jake
fight.
Paul now wins 3-0 in boxing, including over an actual undefeated MMA fighter who has ties to Conor McGregor. Like, Jake Paul is cashed in on all of this in a big way.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, the dude is a complete trash, but he has tapped into the zeitgeist of being trashy and loud,
wow. And
people are eating it up.
Love it. Okay, let's move on to some more UFC-centric stuff. First, I want to touch on, the news came out, I think approximately 4 days ago. Yoel Romero signs with Bellator after Scott Coker initially didn't really seem too interested in the possibility. And we're at a really interesting place, right? Because following Vadim Nemkov's win over Ryan Bader, you had Scott Coker claiming that the Bellator's light heavyweight division was superior to that of the UFC. Dana White obviously brushes that off, but now that John Jones is technically no longer a top 5 ranked, or at all a ranked light heavyweight, and you have Anthony Rumble Johnson and Yoel Romero plying their trade at 205, where do you think the debate currently lies? Because I'd argue it's pretty close right now.
I mean, the thing with the UFC, and they're always going to technically win this argument, because Bellator's, like, the quality Bellator has nothing to do with the future. Having Phil Davis, having Ryan Bader, having Yoel Romero, having Anthony Johnson, having these people, it would be kind of, it's better than claiming that Bellator had the best middleweight division or like the best light heavyweight division or something when they had like Tito Ortiz and Rampage Jackson. But the philosophy is still the same, that you're hiring guys that might give you 2 or 3 or 4 big fights in the immediate future. And then after that, you're just looking, you're scraping back to whatever fresh collegiate wrestler who's never fought in MMA before is looking to build a career, or whatever the other, talented guy from another combat sport who's first trying his baby steps into MMA. Like, those are the people that Bellator is headhunting and that they're going to get. And the building and success rate on that is slow and poor.
Yeah.
And it's, it's a good gimmick at the moment. It'll make some fun fights, but it's not going to, your young talent, your prodigies, your people that are going to be highly competitive elite fighters in the future are still in the UFC,
I'd counter a little, and just to say, I think Bellator has done a better job as of late about picking and choosing when to bring in these veteran guys.
Sure, yeah.
I think AJ McKee is probably Bellator's biggest success story right now as he
Yeah.
heads towards that Grand Prix final. Where do you think? Let's say we have a future where Jan Blachowicz. I want to eliminate Izzy because I think if Jan Blachowicz beats Israel Adesanya, this isn't an argument. But let's say that fight doesn't happen, and you have Jan Blachowicz beat Glover Teixeira and a couple more of the contenders at light heavyweight, and Vadim Nemkov is able to beat these other guys: Corey Anderson, Yoel, Anthony Rumble Johnson. Do you think that independent conversation, Jan Blachowicz, Vadim Nemkov, is closer?
Sure. I mean, Jan has kind of constructed himself into an elite light heavyweight by being one of the only guys who throws a jab at light heavyweight, and it's brought him a title. You can't knock it, but I would be shocked if Jan Blachowicz was still light heavyweight champ by the end of next year. Like the dominance, the physical dominance, the technical depth, the creativity, things like that. They're not so outstanding in his game that I think if he has to fight, like Magomed Ankalaev or even the big Austrian Alexander Rakic or fighters like that, if he's consistently facing like 3 or 4 of those guys in a row, then he's gonna walk away winning every one of those fights. It's not something even over his own career that Blachowicz has tended to do.
Okay. Because we got a lot of winners this week, I want to touch on 2 guys coming out of UFC 256. The first that I want to touch on, of course, Charles Oliveira with a dominant one-sided win that was apparent to everyone except Tony Ferguson, who seems to think that he had Charles Oliveira mentally stumped after round 1. Not sure how he got there.
It is notable because I think I see where you're going with this, but it should be noted that at least his own mind, Tony Ferguson is never going to be on the loser side of your conversations.
Yeah, we should get Tony on here and have that conversation 100%. Charles Oliveira puts himself in a position where I think he is not getting a title shot, but he is 1 fight away. Maybe under the circumstance that Dana is able to convince Khabib to take 1 more fight and we can't get a super fight like GSP. Maybe then, I don't know, because you don't really have anyone else that Khabib would be willing to fight. Because he's beat all of them with the exception of Michael Chandler, who hasn't fought in the UFC. But let's say he's 1 win away. Man, how good is Charles Oliveira? Do you think he's the biggest threat to the lightweight crown? Like in a situation where Khabib retires and we set up some sort of tournament, where would you place him in the pecking order of who you think would win?
Well, it's kind of a hard question in some ways because there are people that he's already lost to in the past. There are fights that Charles Oliveira has already failed to win that hasn't been a while now since those fights happened. But the guy who lost to Paul Felder, are we totally sure that guy is 100% gone?
Mm-hmm. Do you think he is?
Similarly, but yeah, Charles Oliveira has made himself an incredibly dangerous opponent. He's rounded out his striking game to a point that his confidence doesn't seem to get checked at any point. Mm-hmm. And as long as his confidence isn't checked, then he's an incredibly technical, dangerous grappler and a good, very confident striker who can walk through shots to land his own shots, create his own offense, and has one of the game's most underrated grappling games. And I think if you're looking at guys, like Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler right now as your sort of lightweight elite class, and you could include Conor McGregor in there, but honestly, guessing when and who and how Conor McGregor is going to fight is not really like you could. Conor McGregor he's the side attraction that's going to get brought in every now and then when he sees a fight he really likes. But if you're like, oh yeah, Conor McGregor is going to beat Dustin Poirier and then he's going to fight Justin Gaethje, like maybe in 2 years, like there's no.
Careful, Zane. Coach Kavanaugh could be watching.
Oh yeah, no, I'll temper it a little. This wonderful man, this paragon of virtue and class.
Yes.
Who knows when he's going to fight again? So. Oliveira is like where he ranks among those people. It's kind of hard to tell because if he ended up just like in a striking match with Gaethje or Dustin Poirier, would I pick him outright? No, but if he can get those if he can do to them what he did to Tony Ferguson, then there's a real threat there. I'm always happy to see Charles Oliveira win. And right now, it's just honestly like I think you're splitting hairs between the lightweight elite right now. You're in that situation where it's kind of like, and I know lightweight's never. Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like after Anderson Silva left or got beat out of the middleweight championship, out of the middleweight title. And suddenly it's like, okay, well, Chris Weidman's pretty good, but so is Luke Rockhold, and turns out so is Michael Bisping. And, you know, every elite middleweight is suddenly just within a razor's edge of one another. And I think when you're looking at Poirier, Gaethje, Oliveira, Chandler, that's what you're looking at. You know, they could all get wins off of one another on any given night.
It's a good problem to have in terms of matchmaking because you get endless combinations of fun fights. Not the best situation if you're looking to really push someone as a star. And I think it's interesting. I have this editorial I've been meaning to write for years, and now it's sort of obsolete because there was a time where we were getting away from the dominant champions because in so many divisions we had this exact problem that you're talking about where the guys were so competitive. And it's weird. All of a sudden, you know, 2019, 2020, we've re-entered an era where you have basically undefeated champions top to down with the exception of a loss or two on their records. Regarding Charles Oliveira, the Justin Gaethje fight strikes me as super interesting because coming out of that Khabib fight, we see someone who, up until that point, we've believed has had almost impenetrable takedown defense, but is really sorely lacking in the submission defense department. So I wonder, it's an interesting fight because Charles Oliveira's striking has gotten really good, not Justin Gaethje good. We know that Charles Oliveira could most likely tap Gaethje on a whim if it gets to the ground, and then we just get into that middle ground. Has Charles's takedowns gotten good enough? I'm not sure. It'd be an exciting fight in all three elements of the sport.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of thing too. I mean, the Gaethje takedown defense was, you know, I was really suspect about his ability to win that Khabib fight. I couldn't really pick him for it because there's an aspect to Gaethje's takedown defense that was always smoke and mirrors, where it's like, yeah, it looks pretty good, but he's faced 4 takedowns in his entire UFC career. You know, it was literally the amount of data you have on that is so thin, and everybody was willing to consent to strike with him, and then, you know, Khabib comes out and the takedowns happen. Like it wasn't that idea that he would just be an impenetrable takedown stopper wasn't there. And for Oliveira, the trick for him is really kind of those upper body lock takedowns that he gets that he's exceptionally good at. And a lot of people, even fighters who are good at defending takedowns, are not prepared for that specific takedown because it's not the typical entry for, you know, once you're below like heavyweight and light heavyweight. Most people are shooting a single or a double and then they're transitioning.
Do you think most, let's take Charles Oliveira, for example, but most of the lightweights, do you think they sort of showed a recipe to getting Gaethje down? Or because a lot of it was the constant pressure. Gaethje tried to stay in the center, pivot away from the cage, and Khabib's intensity and speed there was a little overwhelming. Do you think that's something these other lightweights can mirror, or is that a Khabib specialty that you're not going to see guys back up Justin the way that he did?
Well, I mean, it's hard to tell because, and I've, you know, Khabib he's a level of athlete that even other elite athletes are not on. That's always been the secret sauce in the Khabib recipe, is that he doesn't look like Yoel Romero, but he's about on that athletic tier when it comes to raw speed and power. And it creates those moments where, like, you know, Khabib like when he got Gaethje down, it was like he was on like a knee and just sort of turned the corner up through a double into a body lock to take Gaethje down. It was one of those things where it's just like, who is fast enough to do that? But at the same time, watching tape on that, I was worried about that specific takedown because when Gaethje tries to stuff a double leg, he sprawls so aggressively that he's open to a back take body lock standing because he's so quick to get his hips down and flatten out that Eddie Alvarez turned the corner on him in the same way and got the same takedown. He just couldn't hold him down. Yeah. So, I think there's something in it, obviously, something that Eddie Alvarez was able to do, Khabib was able to do. Whether that results in keeping Gaethje down, whether that results in the exact same amount of success that Khabib had, or whether that's purely a mark of his own absurd athletic gifts, I couldn't tell you,
Okay. Last thing on the winners, we do need to move to our losers of the week. Kevin Holland. Okay, full disclosure, I did pick Jacare to win this fight. And
sure, me too.
In my defense and in your defense, I don't think anyone could have predicted that Kevin Holland would score a knockout in the way that he scored that knockout. Dude was laying on his back and threw a punch. It is absurd.
Yeah.
Is Kevin Holland the real deal now, or is this the sort of thing that could still be exploited at a high level, his takedown defense?
I mean, Kevin Holland is always going to be the real deal. Dude is keeping it 100% all the time.
Yeah.
No question. And I'm a huge fan, but there's a quite like we picked Jacare to win for the exact reasons that in the exact way that Jacare lost. Mm-hmm. Like, he got Kevin Holland down immediately, was in his guard, was grappling and scrambling with him. These are the exact recipes for a Jacare victory.
And he's notoriously durable, so we thought.
Yeah. And then he gets smacked in the temple, and suddenly that fight's over. But we just had Brendan Allen, who couldn't box his way past Sean Strickland, who tapped Holland out in a prolonged ground game. And that was a battle that Holland was winning. There's always going to be an element of wildness and an element of structurelessness to Holland that's going to lead him to lose fights at an elite level. These losses are gonna happen. It could be, I think he's set to fight Derek Brunson right now. Like, Derek Brunson could just be too big and too strong and just kind of horse him around, and that'll be the end of it. Holland's a guy who's talked about going down to 170. He's a small middleweight, or a thin one at least. So, but at the same time, there's also clearly a lot of confidence and skill that has been building in Holland's game. He's very much like enjoys feeling like he's in command of a fight. You see him out there like with this thing with the guy who hit the cool kick, Joaquin Buckley. Yeah, you see his fight with Joaquin Buckley, and he's basically just teaching Joaquin Buckley how to fight in that fight. He's coaching him up, just being like, yeah, no, that's good, throw it like this, and just kind of really flowing out there. So there's definitely a great elite level command of the cage to him, but I think that it'll be one of those things where I don't know that Holland will ever get to a title shot. He might be in that sort of Donald Cerrone-esque way where he's going to fight all the time. He's not going to win all the time, but he will always be fun and like a headlining type of talent.
Yeah. And I think one thing about Kevin Holland's, as we wrap up on the winner section, that doesn't get enough credit prior to that knockout, the elbows that he was throwing off of his back, between having the feet on the hips and the guard, you would imagine someone would say, hey, like, you're on the ground with Jacare, chill out, be mindful of your position, maybe try and close your guard to get back to your feet. But I think he actually had the perfect game plan, that solution. He's like, I can't contend with Jacare on the ground, so I'm just going to beat the living crap out of him. And I think that, Jacare took a lot of damage from a surprising position even before the KO, and I think there's a direct correlation between those elbows that he was throwing beforehand and the KO that came shortly after.
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, it's like I say, Holland's got this great presence of mind and command, even when he's doing wild stuff, even when he's making errors, even when he's doing things that could get him hurt. He always seems like he knows exactly what's going on in the middle of chaos. He always seems like he's got a plan for whatever chaotic thing is going on right now. Even like you look at his fight with Thiago Santos, and Santos was like lighting him up, standing with these huge power shots. And Holland would eat one, and then he'd just swing like this looping, clubbing left hand that would land, and it would drive Santos back. And it was just like, even in the middle of this wild mess of a war, Holland was always still able to know where he was and what he wanted to do. And it's a chaos that makes him always thrilling to watch, and it's going to lead to some great wins over time. I'm sure of it.
Okay, as we head towards the losers, guys, a quick reminder: hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell, leave a like on this video. Can't express how much that does for us as we head into 2021. And of course, I'm seeing a buzzing live chat today, guys. Leave us one super chat donation, any amount. That gets all of your questions, statements, whatever you got for us read. If you want to clown Zane Simon, hey, more power to you. On that note, let's segue into the losers, of which you are obviously not. Me, I'm not so sure sometimes. Man, so it feels like 2020 has seen like a lot of changing of the guard matches. We've seen so many veterans fight up-and-comers, and I don't know if that's intentional or so much a consequence of having basically weekly fight cards for as long as either of us can remember. But we've had some winners. Glover Teixeira is at an incredible career resurgence. Andrei Arlovsky is still ticking away, and we saw Anthony Lionheart-Smith sort of shut down the doubters with his submission win over Devin Clark. UFC 256 was not that. We had Tony Ferguson lose, we had Junior Dos Santos lose, and we had Jacare Souza lose. Let's start, though, with Tony Ferguson very quickly. I think his days as a potential champion are kind of numbered at this point. Where do you see Tony Ferguson? Where do you see maybe perhaps this last stage of Tony Ferguson's career playing out? Is it in the fun fights? Do you think he can still make it back to the title, or do we start matching him with prospects?
I mean, the lower down in divisions you go, the more and more impossible it becomes to maintain contender status as you get older, and Ferguson's still a few years shy of 40, but it's a few years now. It's not well shy of 40, And I think he'll settle into this kind of, and it'll depend on what he wants too, because obviously Ferguson's a guy who always thinks of himself as a contender. So I'm sure he can settle into an action fighting role. He can Jim Miller it up out there. He can play the Donald Cerrone card, play late career Anthony Pettis. We've got some lightweights who people have thought were well past their elite prime for a while now, who are still going out and putting on great fights and being fun talents. But if Ferguson really only sees himself as hunting glory and hunting titles or something like that, then he'll probably just get sick of it and leave.
Yeah.
But honestly, I don't really I can't really see Tony Ferguson as a loser in my mind. I know he got blown out by Charles Oliveira, but honestly, when you're as crazy as Tony Ferguson is, there's been no reconciliation. There's been no grand moment in his mind where he breaks and he's like, man, I just don't have it anymore. I can't keep doing this. And as long as that doesn't happen, then what has he really lost? Sure. Fighting is made out of delusion, and having the level of delusion that Tony Ferguson has, he's not gonna check out and be like, oh man, I'm now I'm out here in Luke Rockhold territory where everything's going wrong and I don't even think I want to do this anymore, and I'm just gonna stop and keep getting knocked out. He came out of that Charles Oliveira fight and he's like, I broke him. That I gotta win out there. And as long as he can keep doing that, I don't know that we really have to consider Tony Ferguson as we don't have to consider him anything less than a guy who's going to keep fighting,
Okay, because there's actually one thing that Joseph Boza touched on in the live chat that I should have gone to. I should have actually put in the title. So I'm just going to give you kind of a yes, no-ish question. By January 1st, 2021, are Jacare Souza and Junior Dos Santos contracted UFC fighters?
Dos Santos, I'm not as sure about. Jacare, probably. Middleweight has enough chaos in it that I think I could see him, just kind of getting to fight somebody else a little lower down the division, getting a win, sticking around. I don't necessarily know that Jacare's, or if he isn't a contracted UFC fighter, it might be because he retired. Like, I don't know that I see Jacare being the kind of guy who's gonna want to go ride out and fight somewhere else.
Yeah.
Dos Santos is a tougher one. There's still lots of fights I think he can win in the heavyweight division, so I don't know that I discount him entirely. But we're getting to the point that it used to take a better striker than Junior Dos Santos or a better wrestler. Like, you had to be kind of one of the two to really beat him. And now it feels like that bar is slipping further and further away to now it's just kind of like, are you big? Are you tough? Can you hang out with JDS and trade hands? You're probably going to catch him at some point. And I don't know how much longer the UFC is going to want to ride that train. I don't know that they're going to get rid of him as part of this big, like, cutting 60 people, all that kind of thing. JDS is a former champion. He's been a long time headlining talent for the UFC. He's willing to fight just about anyone, it usually seems like. So I don't think they're going to get that Yoel Romero situation where Dana White's coming out and talking about, like, oh, Yoel Romero turned down 5 fights or whatever it was. And but yeah, there's definitely a point we're reaching that sort of nadir where these guys the returns are diminishing steeply. I'm more worried about JDS than Jacare, though.
Okay. Last thing on the losers section, and obviously at no fault of her own, it's a story we saw play out a lot in 2020, but from John Jones to Dustin Poirier, now to Rose Namajunas. Dana White says in an interview with BTE Sports, I think, that we're probably seeing Weili Zhang versus Carla Esparza next. A little surprising there. I think there's some other contenders that we could have considered. Anywho, no disrespect to Carla. What I think everyone wanted to and expected to see, including the UFC, was Weili Zhang versus Rose Namajunas. Dana White says basically Rose doesn't want to fight right now. Ariel Helwani reaches out to Rose's coach, fiance Pat Barry, who says that is the farthest thing from the truth. We're not going to air it out publicly. If the UFC wants to talk, they know how to reach us. We've seen this, man. Either the fighter doesn't want to fight at a particular or can't fight at a particular time, or they're not getting justified, payments worth what they deem is reasonable compensation. And then Dana White's not even playing anymore. He just says, all right, screw you. We're going to move on. We can have this talk ad nauseum. Unfortunately, we don't have the time for it today in regards to how much leverage UFC now has, particularly with the ESPN deal, what we need to see change about fighter rights. But we've seen more or less. It's weird because this time around it seems like there's less vitriol from Dana White. Before, when fighters would start playing what he would consider hardball, which is ridiculous, at the negotiation table, it almost seemed like Dana White would write them off. At this stage, it's kind of like, cool, it's not going to work right now. We'll get back to it later, but we're not waiting, which isn't right. I just don't feel like it's as personal as it used to be with Dana. Do you think the two sides work this out and we get Rose versus Weili, or do you think we're going to have to wait until mid-2021, late 2021 to see that fight?
I will say this will probably, I would assume this probably takes longer, just because I'm sure Rose Namajunas isn't in a position where she doesn't want to fight or doesn't want a title shot. I'm sure that it's a money thing or a scheduling thing. The world's kind of chaotic right now, obviously. Yeah. She might be like, well, I don't want to fight. I'm not going to be ready to fight anybody until the spring. And the UFC's like, yeah, well, we want to make this fight for February. So that could easily be the case. But I will say that I do think, and this is something I felt like with Khabib as well. Namajunas really gives off this vibe. I don't think she cares if she doesn't fight that much.
I love that so much, yeah.
Like, I just think that Namajunas is just like, look, I am a fighter. I will be fighting for a living. This is what I do. or like, even the Diaz brothers, it's the same vibe. It's just like, look, if you're not going to give me exactly what I want, I don't care about doing this so much that I'm going to make exceptions for you. So I expect it'll take a little while for this to get resolved. And in the meantime, we might even see Namajunas fight somebody else, fight Yan Xiaonan or somebody like that, where the UFC is just like, look, we've got a fight for you in the spring. It's not a title shot. If you win that fight, then sure, you can have a title shot again. But at the moment, we're moving on because in the ESPN era, they have content every week. They need to have a show, and every pay-per-view they need to have champions on it. And so pay-per-view events have to have title fights. The UFC's got champions that need booking, and they're not going to wait for contenders.
Really random question. Where do you fall on the Weili Zhang, Zhang Weili debate? For me, I look at it as, well, obviously one caters more to the Chinese market because it's the order in which they would say the name. But for me, I kind of look at it as like, well, if we're using English language structure, I'd assume it'd be it would apply all the same all the way through. Not that it really matters. I'm just curious, when you're having the conversations about the champ, which do you say?
Well, I anybody who's listened to my Vivisection podcast, small plug,
the elbow.
Yeah, gotta push it, knows that my general reaction to people's names and fighters' names is just to push through it and just do whatever feels right in the moment. So, if I were in the broadcast booth, if I were interviewing her, I would try to make sure I got it right to be what, would be most respectful to her. Because that's what really all I care about. Like, I don't need to care about it for myself. Otherwise, I'm just going to say, Weili Zhang, okay? Or, if somebody says to me, if you'd started the conversation with Zhang Weili, I would have said Zhang Weili. Like, I just will default to whatever is quickest and easiest because I don't know, life's too short for me to have to care about that.
What is the name of the former UFC strawweight champ who beat Carlos Esparza for the title?
Weili Zhang. But see, like, I'm looking now.
No, it's not.
Oh, wait, no.
Who beat Carlos Esparza for the title?
Who beat Joanna Jędrzejczyk?
Okay, that's pretty good. I don't know how to pronounce her name, let alone spell it.
Yeah, Polish I'm actually pretty good at because you just treat half the consonants as silent.
Yes.
Like J's and Z's and Y's and all those things, like they just don't have any notable sound that you need to pronounce. Yeah. And then once you got that down, then you can just say Yana and Jacare.
Okay, we're closing out in 5 minutes. Let's do a quick UFC Vegas 17 preview. Last reminder, folks, subscribe, tap the notification bell, leave a like on this video. Super chat donations warm the heart on a cold Christmas season. Okay, main event, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Geoff Neal. Of course, this used to be the co-main event, moved up after Hamzat versus Leon was postponed. Who has more to gain here? It's an interesting position for both guys. For Geoff Neal, this is really a chance to assert himself as a viable contender in the welterweight division. For Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, it's cool because you kind of look at this as a turning point fight for him. He has that Vicente Luque win. He lost Anthony Pettis in a fight that he was handedly winning up until that point. Obviously, the two fights with Tyron Woodley. Darren Till, another one where a lot of people scored it for him, but he came out on the wrong end of the judges' scorecards. He seems like he's in a position where he's gatekeeper-ish, but I think if he beats Geoff Neal, you can't deny him something meaningful towards a title shot. Who do you think kind of has more at stake to lose here? Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Geoff Neal?
I think it's unquestionably Geoff Neal. Mm-hmm. Like, for Thompson, this win wouldn't be anywhere among his biggest wins, It's like beating Jorge Masvidal is a way bigger deal. Yeah. Beating Robert Whittaker, in retrospect, way bigger deal. Like, Thompson, this for him, to me, this is a tread water fight. He is, if he's a gatekeeper, he's a gatekeeper to the top 5.
Yeah.
And being a gatekeeper to the top 5 will mean anytime you string 2 or 3 wins together, you're back in the title conversation. But for Neal, this is his first big shot to assert himself as one of the welterweight elite. He wins this fight. Suddenly we're talking like if Thompson's a gatekeeper to the top 5, then we're talking about Geoff Neal as a top 5 fighter. Suddenly he's a win or 2 away from title contention. And that's a much bigger deal for him than for Thompson, who could lose this fight and lose another and still be in the conversation as top 10 guy, later this year with another win or 2. Like he's put himself in that sort of perennial, we know Thompson's elite. We know he's almost, you basically, there's an argument to spell out there that the only person who's ever actually beat Stephen Thompson is Anthony Pettis.
Yeah. I was kind of on the fence when I asked this question, but I think you've convinced me that Geoff Neal is the one with all the gains. I see the little smirk. I'm glad that you got there.
It is a more dangerous fight for Thompson than anything, because Geoff Neal has no name recognition, no fan love, no hype, there's no Geoff Neal fan club out there. So if Thompson wins or loses this, it's much more damaging to him. Whereas Geoff Neal loses to Stephen Thompson, like we just saw Vicente Luque lose to Stephen Thompson, and I'm still hyped about the next time Vicente Luque fights.
Vicente Luque is possibly my favorite fighter right now.
Exactly. That did no damage to him at all.
Look at that. You're right. Okay, last thing. Quick shout out to Chaos Williams versus Michel Pereira, because that is such a fun fight. You're going to see loads of incredible striking, I'm sure. And speaking of incredible striking, Anthony Pettis fights Alex Morono just around the date of the 10-year anniversary of the Showtime kick. I have a weird feeling they're going to push that angle hard on the broadcast. I feel like it's an appropriate time as ever to do a little bit of a career retrospect on Anthony Pettis. Do you think he's going to go extra hard trying to bust out something crazy on Saturday?
I mean, he'll be forced to, in a way, just because of the way Alex Morono fights. Mm-hmm. Morono's a guy who will just throw caution to the wind. He knows he's not necessarily the best athlete in the division, so he makes fights difficult and ugly and bloody, and tries to go out there and really push a pace with people and make them think about everything he could do. And those are the kind of fights where Pettis can get pretty backed up and have to pull out something flashy to turn the tide. Mm-hmm. So I think you always get something flashy out of Anthony Pettis, winning or losing. He's always looking to steer the fight off of big moments. I think he'll be probably successful against Morono.
I think so too.
Just because it still takes a really elite athlete to beat Anthony Pettis. Yeah. We saw Gilbert Melendez fight the kind of fight that I'm expecting Alex Morono to fight. Mm-hmm. And he didn't win it, and that was Gilbert Melendez.
We talked about Tony Ferguson having this delusion, perhaps, that, he's always in the title mix. I think Anthony Pettis is someone who, for a little while there, struggled with his fall from grace. The world was really in his palms for a moment there. He had the Wheatie box cover, and it came crashing down hard and fast. And I think it was a tough pill, understandably, of course, for him to swallow. I got the feeling coming out of that Tony Ferguson fight, obviously, he fought a good competitive fight. His corner called it off because he had a broken hand. I remember his reaction in the post-fight. He was so gracious about it. I think Anthony Pettis is finally at a point in his career, has been at least for a little while now, where he's cool with the understanding that he probably isn't getting another title shot. Do you feel like he's in a better headspace now than he was a few years ago?
Oh, yeah. No, unquestionably. I think Anthony Pettis, for a while, after those losses to RDA and to Alvarez and Barboza, I think there was a point where Anthony Pettis was trying to fix himself. He was trying to turn himself back into a contender by patching the holes in his game. And he's even talked about this a little. Yeah. And at some point, he realized that by doing that, he was having no fun at all fighting. He wasn't necessarily winning fights. He was having inconsistent success, but he was not having fun.
Yeah.
And I think at some point in there, Anthony Pettis has realized that the best way for him to fight is to just enjoy fighting and to do what he wants and to fight the style he wants, win or lose. And the fights we've seen him have since then, he seems much more like just kind of willing to go out, try his game. It'll work sometimes, it won't work other times, and he'll be having fun though. I mean, I got a lot of respect for the way Pettis carries himself in the cage, just because there are big problems with his footwork, with his willingness to get backed up, with his tendency to end up sitting on the cage, things like that have just never gone away. But he will always try. He's always tough as hell, and he will always try really hard to win. And he'll always take any fight, So
yeah,
I like what Anthony Pettis is. I like the way he's shifted away from. Honestly, I kind of like the way he's shifted away from trying to be a better fighter.
Well, at some point, man, fighters are in a tough predicament because it's one of those things where it's like you talked about the grandeur and the delusion. It's like if you don't believe truly in your heart of hearts that you can be the best, where are you gonna source the motivation to put yourself through the things that fighters put themselves through? And I think there's a very fine, delicate balance that Anthony Pettis has struck in terms of accepting some realities, but finding motivations that still make him competitive. So that's a hard thing to achieve, and I commend him for it. All right, absolutely. Zane, we got to wrap. Hey, where in Alaska are you from originally?
Juneau.
Okay. My fellow Canadian Joel Pearl wants to give a shout out to Ketchy Candles in Ketchikan, Alaska.
Big shout out to Ketchikan, neighbor in the southeast.
All right, there we go. Zane, as we wrap up here, plug the vivisection, whatever you like. Floor is yours.
Yeah, y'all, you can find me on Twitter at @TheZaneSimon. Find me over at Bloody Elbow every day, doing writing stuff, all that. I'm over on the Bloody Elbow Podcast Network. Bloody Elbow Presents over on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, all those places. Got the vivisection every week. We break down in depth, 2 hours, 1 hour on the prelims, 1 hour on the main card, every UFC card. Go through, make picks, talk about odds, all that stuff. And then immediately after every event, I'll be out on the 6th round doing post-event breakdown, talking about what we just saw, talking about who we want to see fighters face next, talking about how good or bad or whatever the UFC card was, all the amazing stuff that happened on any given night. So you can find me doing all that stuff. And so that's about it, I think.
Boom. Yes, I will no longer complain about my pre-fight, post-fight duties after hearing that laundry list. Zane, enjoy UFC Vegas 17. That goes for our listeners as well. More importantly, enjoy 3 weeks without a UFC event. Isn't that going to be nice?
Oh, yeah. In that meantime, stay tuned for the return of the MMA Depressed Us, where we will be diving into the best of the worst fights we can find in MMA history. Recent past, some career retrospectives. I know we've done a Giant Silva retrospective and some Bob Sapp retrospectives, things like that. So stay tuned for that. We just kind of do a MST3K thing. Me and Connor and Phil line up a few fights, watch them all, and do a live commentary as we're going.
Love it. Guys, thank you so much for checking out today's show. Really appreciate all the engagement in the live chat. Shout out, as always, to our audio-only listeners. Thank you for being the foundation of 1-2 Punch. Y'all know what's up. It's time for my crappy outro. This is Shakiel Mahjouri, and stay tuned for everything fightful and so delightful. Peace out.